Dratnos, the dungeons are looking really sus in 9.2.5. There's some Dreadlords that have infiltrated my keys.
Brr. Emergency meeting.
Okay. Everything's getting worse and worse every single week. Anyways, so there's a new affix on the 9.2.5 PTR. The new Shrouded Affix has made its way there. And I don't think we've talked about it yet. We did know a little bit of information beforehand, at least in regards to what was data mined, but it was kind of unclear as to how the seasonal affix worked. And now we know a little bit more about it. And it's based around like a choose your buff mechanic, correct?
Yeah, so at the start of the dungeon, you get to take a look at whatever 4 stats you want, or if you don't pick anything, it will give you verse automatically. You just get 2% of that stat for free, or a flat amount of mastery. And then you get another stack every time you kill a Dreadlord. And the dungeon is full of Dreadlords that replace mobs when you pull them. They have a little aura around them, so you can see where there's going to be a Dreadlord, and you pull it, and it turns into a Dreadlord, and bang, there you go. You have a mob to kill that gives you 2%. I think haste and verse are going to be the most common picks for most folks, because problem with mastery is that instead of being a percent, it has to be a flat number because of the way that mastery works, which means that it will hit stat diminishing returns that were introduced this expansion, whereas the other 3 won't. So I think mastery won't be super popular for that. And crit could be for some specs, but
it's funny because I'm pretty sure like versatility. Okay, so first off, 2% main stat per stack, very over budget, like what you'd expect, especially since you can stack it up to 20. So being able to get just 40% versatility, that is just a boatload of versatility. Haste is also pretty good, but I do think that versatility is generally going to be the better option. I do worry that okay, so I actually think that this seasonal affix is really well designed and has a lot of potential. Are there any potential pitfalls that you see right off the rip?
I think that a common play pattern for high keys is going to be choosing versatility, getting to the hard bosses with like 20 or 30% versatility, and it'll be kind of like BFA Season 4, where that is something you use to power your defenses, right?
Sure.
I don't actually hate that, though, and having a bunch of haste by the end of the dungeon also feels good. Also, I just kind of like that it doesn't really get in the way of the dungeons or overload your brain in the way that some of the affixes I don't like have done. So that's been a cool part. The Dreadlords themselves, they have 3 mechanics, which none of them are that hard to deal with. One is just a tank vampiric attack that heals them back up, that you can use damage reductions to reduce how much gets healed. One is like a wave attack, a frontal cone that's pretty nasty if it hits you, puts a nasty mortal strike on you, but pretty telegraphed and pretty easy to dodge. And the other is like a sleepy cloud, like in the Lord's Dread encounter, that you want to dodge. But then there is this mini boss as well that is in the dungeon.
We see it on screen right here.
Yeah, the mini boss
Zulgamux
does some nasty stuff where couple of different effects. So we're fighting a Dreadlord and a mini boss in this clip, and the mini boss does like a AoE group damage and heal. Like it damages the whole group, shields herself. You can see it's doing a lot of damage to the group and a lot of healing. The thing's back at 100% health here now. I suspect a lot of this is like we were kind of scuffing this, how to do this. If you do this right, you probably break through the shield and kick it very quickly. But yeah, that was pretty annoying. There were also these bats that weren't CCable, but will be in the future.
Right,
so that these things will be a lot less damaging to deal with. That if they finish their cast, it sort of mind controls you and basically means you're going to die in any real key, I suspect. And then also a swirly that you got to get out of. But again, that's not too much of a worry.
Something that we didn't test and something but I do believe is probably real is I suspect that this heal is mortal strikeable. So
yeah,
I believe that
it's both mortal strikeable and it's reduced by, like, it's just heals based on how much damage it does. So if you pop like a barrier or a Devo aura or just have everybody use personals, it will heal for less. That's another thing that just it says in the tooltip that's how it operates. So yeah, and the mortal strikeable part, I guess I don't know for sure, but I suspect it's mortal strikeable. Yeah.
Question: can you cancel it with Mirrors of Torment?
That's going to be it, or can you? But by holding W at the perfect time. These are the mysteries that you always have to ask yourself whenever there's a heal.
But yeah, I think overall, whenever we were testing this mini boss, It seemed a bit rough, I will admit. It was a bit tough. I suspect that it's going to get tuned down just a little bit. Of course, like you said, our composition wasn't spectacular, but at the same point, this mob, I worry about the scaling of it. At the same point, the fact that the bat we know is going to be changed to be CCable in the future builds. We also weren't running an MS. How much is that realistically going to change this kind of thing? Because we were having to dump basically all of our damage to kill the bat. And so then it was just, we were getting like the full blood siphon tick. And then it was just like, okay, man, it was one of those things that the mob was healing up. Not faster than we could damage it, but very close.
Yeah, we spent a couple minutes in combat with these things. And the thing is, it doesn't give you count either. It does give you 3 stacks of the stat buff. So it gives you 6% verse potentially. And that's nice. But on the other hand, if it doesn't give you count and it takes you minutes to kill, that might be the kind of thing where it's actually worth just skipping. And anytime there's a seasonal affix where we're thinking about skipping this early and it's not something that just like, oh, the MDI teams and the high key pushers eventually do, that's something that you got to be a little bit worried about. So I am worried about that. But again, we fought a harder version of this than I think will make it to live. I am wondering, though, if maybe especially the mini boss should give some count to make it so that it's at least a little bit less incentivized to skip. Because the regular Dreadlords, they mostly occur in pulls. You're not going to really be skipping them anyways. And they're probably worth it for the count that they give. But yeah, the Dreadlord, a little bit more worried. The mini boss, rather, I'm a little bit worried about being something that I'm not excited to see.
Yeah, and so overall, this is one of those things that like it's kind of interesting to see like which mobs are actually Dreadlords in every pull. We even had one pull, like one of these big Ogrons is actually a Dreadlord, and it's kind of funny how he'll just turn into like one of the small Dreadlords, and you're like, wait, what? Okay, but I do think it's pretty neat. At the same point, I did run into this issue where I felt like. So I know, like, stat-wise, numerically, I'm super powerful at the end of the dungeon. I know if I have 10 or 15 stacks of this versatility buff that I've accrued over the course of the whole entire dungeon, I'm incredibly powerful at the end of it. I don't know that unless I'm looking at the damage meter, though. It's got this weird thing where, like, I know that the stats themselves are over budget, but it doesn't feel like it's over budget at the end of like the dungeon. So there's definitely this perceived value versus like actual strength thing that's going on. With how good this buff is. I wonder, is this something that you would address, or do you think that maybe it's something that's like kind of okay and that players just kind of have to deal with? Because like for me, I feel like maybe there's like a proc or like a buff that you could gain, but it's kind of weird. I don't know. It's nice because I like the amount of stats that it's giving, because it's giving just a ton of stats, but it doesn't feel like it's the most impactful thing, even though it is.
I do share your concerns a little bit, especially for like less experienced players, the kind of more casual players where, you know, a 10% verse buff or whatever might feel even less impactful than it does for you. I will say, for me, choosing haste, when I chose haste, it was very noticeable by the end of the dungeon, because it was just, you know, full uptime bloodlust effectively at that point. So it's a lot of power, but yeah, it's kind of invisible, especially if you choose something other than haste,
or just
depending on
verse.
how your spec operates. Yeah, if you're just taking verse, you know, I think the high key pushers will certainly notice it in the same way that you noticed and felt good about taking versatile at the end of BFA season 4, but it definitely wasn't as fun as taking Twilight Dev or Echoing Void or whatever, right? Something where it would just like explode for a bunch of damage. So I do wonder if there's a way to change it into something like that, or have an option for something that is more of a, you know, like a maybe if it was the same amount of stats, but it was like it gave you a Concordance of the Legion Fall style proc that you would do for the rest of the dungeon, and the amount of stat that it procced would scale up, and that way it would still be like, you know, you'd feel like you were hitting the gas rather than it being sort of the slow turning up of stats that you don't really feel along the way. That being said, I like that it's not just like a encrypted, you know, one shot and then it's over buff, because those sorts of things do really put a lot of pressure on like not wiping, not dropping your buff, making sure you make use of it while it's there. And I really did appreciate that it was like, this buff is permanent. It's not like demanding that much of you. It means that because you're seeing 6 new dungeons this season, you can focus on learning the new dungeons. And again, new is obviously they're returning dungeons, but still for most players, somewhere between 2 and 6 of these dungeons will be stuff that they are very or pretty unfamiliar with, unless you're an unbelievable boomer at this point and played back during mop challenge modes.
Something that was actually really interesting. I really like the haste buff in Junkyard, by the way. So just being able to take haste, it scaled with the shock bots, like the amount of procs you got from the shock bots. That was pretty cool.
Turbo OP for sure. Like this is going to be a season where I saw a tweet about this. There's like, people are going to be doing 35 junkyards and 25 upper, and they're going to be similar amounts of DPS check because of the haste aura plus the shock bot.
We did a 20. So you can't.
We did
necessarily
15s of the other dungeons, and we did 20 of junkyard, and they felt comparable. Yeah, it was crazy.
Yeah. I mean, granted, we've also played Junkyard more recently than the rest of the keys. So
yeah, because let's talk a little bit about the other dungeons that are coming this season, right? Because we do have a new rotation coming in that is at the same time as this new affix.
Yes,
we've got Iron Docks, Grimrail Depot, Lower Karazhan, Upper Junkyard, Lower Junkyard, and then the 2 Tazaveshes are remaining. But all of the other Shadowlands dungeons will not be keys. Those are gone. Starting next season.
So we played through all of the old ones. We actually didn't play through the Tazaveshes. At some point, we'll probably need to do that because I want to
see what Shrouded looks like in there. Yeah,
I want to see what Shrouded looks like in there. I think that I kind of have a general idea of how it's going to be in there, but I'm not 100% sure on it. Overall, I'm pretty hot on the Tazavesh dungeons. I think that I actually kind of like the Tazavesh dungeons even this season. This may be a hot take amongst some people, but I thought they were pretty cool. I thought that Junkyard with this seasonal affix was pretty good, and then I thought Iron Docks was decent, and then Grimrail, Upper Kara, Workshop. Dude, Workshop I was not a fan of. Workshop Without Awakened, for those who have played recently, Workshop Without Awakened is really awkward.
You have to do the skip through the area with the stealth detecting things, and I, in particular, am going to need to practice that a tremendous amount on like M0, I don't even know if you can do M0 in there. I guess you probably can. It's just like old BFA levels M0. So I'll be able to just solo my way to that point in the dungeon and then just run that gauntlet over and over again until I'm an expert again.
I don't know. It was definitely one of those things that like the more open dungeons felt a lot better with the Shrouded seasonal affix. So I felt like whenever I had more opportunities to either intentionally pull or intentionally skip the Shrouded mobs, that felt the best, because there were pulls like this from Workshop. Like, look at this. We just have the Infiltrator in this pull. There was basically no choice as to whether or not we wanted to get it or not. And then we ended up pulling the mini boss at some point. Was that this mob that we had the mini boss in? Anyways, we ended up pulling the mini boss here just in a couple of minutes, and it's one of those things that like we didn't have the option to even skip it if we realistically wanted to, because the dungeons were super linear. So I think to me it comes as no surprise that the linear dungeons felt like they were the most difficult, at least with this Shrouded seasonal affix. I don't know how you felt about it though.
Yeah, I don't know. I like the idea for sure. Yeah, there's the clouds that you can't see under the river. That's going to be fixed apparently as well.
Yeah, like the sleep cloud, you can like see it if I'm like I doubt you can even see it like in the YouTube
apparently
video.
It's going to be more visible in the water too. So yeah, you can see the one you disengaged into there. I could barely see at all.
Like, where is it? So then I start looking. I was like, okay, yeah, sure.
Yeah. I don't know. I quite liked going back to these old dungeons. I quite like the way that the count worked out in here as well. You know, there's that really nasty pack at the end of the dungeon as well that you have to try and skip through. Yeah. But you can like gate through or do a death skip or something and skip that most annoying pack. And then with the way Shrouded works, again, you do have to slightly relearn your count from, if you remember, like the lower and upper counts from the last couple expansions, because again, those Dreadlords replace mobs that gave count and don't give count themselves. That's something that I wonder if they might change. I'm not sure how I feel about it, because it does give you stats. It's like, I do understand you are getting something out of killing them, right? But
yeah,
I'm not sure if maybe they should give count, or maybe it's fair that they don't.
My initial impressions were like, oh, why don't these give count? This is going to mess with my pathing. But realistically, it's only messing with my pathing for the Tazavesh dungeons, because these dungeons, like, so I kind of remember the route for a couple of these keys specifically, but I don't necessarily remember the route for all of them. And then for Grimrail, Workshop, and Upper Kara, okay, so Upper Kara is a little bit unique. There, you have more count than necessary in Upper Kara realistically. But for Grimrail and Workshop, both of those keys, you basically just hold W and you hit 100% enemy forces. There's nothing to really skip. There's no like uniqueness in routing or anything. So to me, there wasn't really any reason for those mobs to give count in those dungeons. Whereas for the more open dungeons, it kind of made more sense that they were supposed to give count, because at that point, then you're able to like More creatively choose your pathing is what I will say, specifically about it. Overall, though, I think it was fine. The reason that I think it's fine is because I'm relearning most of these dungeons, so it's not like I'm going in the Halls of Atonement or something like that and having to relearn it without like 40 count or something like that I otherwise would normally have. I'm relearning Tazavesh, both of the Tazaveshes, which at that point, okay, it does kind of suck for those dungeons specifically, but it's mostly okay in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. I'm pretty happy about the affix, all things considered, and I love the idea of swapping around the dungeons and giving us some fresh blood, even if there are some dungeons in the pool, like perhaps the Grimrail Depot that I actually didn't even mind playing it. I might change my mind on it. It's definitely a very linear dungeon, so I don't get to do all the M+ routing that I enjoy in dungeons like Junkyard, but the trash themselves and most of the bosses were pretty fun, so okay. I don't know. I like the concept so much that even the specific dungeons I'm very excited about just the general trend that we're seeing with both affix design and dungeon rotations.
So we played Storming Sanguine, and I don't know if it could have been more cursed in this key, by the way. So for those who don't know, Grimrail Depot, okay, very narrow dungeon. Just look at how narrow this is. In addition to that, we were slamming Sanguine in there because we're sadists. And on top of that, basically all of these mobs have like frontals in some capacity. And so we were just getting blasted by the frontals fairly regularly. It was difficult to learn. I do wonder, like, once I give it more time, how I'm going to feel about it. My initial impressions, I don't want to say I was positive on it, but I wasn't as overtly negative as I'm seeing some people be. At the same point, I do understand how I can get to that place once I play it for an extended period of time, because like I can see how this dungeon gets old relatively quickly.
Yeah, I again, it's only going to be for a couple months. Probably season 4 is going to be a fairly short season.
So, yep. I'm most
with that in mind, I think the affix being a little bit of a simpler one, being one that kind of powers us up and just lets us blast a little bit. I'm looking forward to it. So
overall, any changes you'd make? So I think for me, like the biggest change I'd probably make is just to the seasonal affix itself. I would make it try to feel a little bit more powerful, even if that. Like so say you cut the buff to 1% per stack, and then you gave like some proc at the end of killing a Dreadlord or something like that, something to make you feel, or like the concordance thing like you also brought up, something to make it feel a little bit more powerful, like you were a bit, I don't want to say more in control, because like the static buff is really cool, but like there is something there that I want to feel like a burst, like a surge of power that I'm gaining, even if like long term that does impact the absolute strength of the affix. I don't know how you felt about it though. Did you agree with that? That would be like the biggest thing I'm changing.
Yeah, I actually, again, I got to pick haste in a lot of these dungeons, and so I was having a great time with
Sure.
it as it exists now. But I do think maybe something to address that, because I do think that's probably going to be a pretty common feel about this, is like, meh, right? Even if objectively it's not meh, might be something to adjust. On the other hand, maybe it just, people gotta learn that 30% verse is a lot, right? This is actually big damage, big survivability, and it makes these bosses that were hard, like King Mechagon, doing King Mechagon with 30% extra verse at the end is going to be a lot less lethal than it used to be at the end of these dungeons. So I'm not necessarily sure I even need to see that change, but I wouldn't mind to see them experiment with it a little bit on PTR some more. Yeah, try some other things.
The only other thing that I would like to see change this pack, Giga Cursed. Like you skip this with the Awakened Pillar. This is the pull that's like right before King Mechagon that nobody ever played. It's got like a Mach 3 bot. I think it's got like double Mach 3 bots and only one shield generator or something like that. This pull, something about it has to change. Whether or not it's like removing True Sight so you can skip it, maybe some ease of skipping. Maybe there's a robot removed from it, because you don't need it for count. Like we were at 100% enemy forces before we even made it to this pull. It's the exact same as like we were routing through last workshop. I think that pack was the only one that was the only thing that felt pretty egregious. Would you agree? Maybe some of the lower Karis stuff felt a bit tough, but I can't tell if that's because we're bad or not. Like that's something that we have to go back to.
I mean, like you can skip pack. Like we were not trying to make a route that avoided the hardest packs in the dungeons, right? Like that's
yeah.
To some extent, like, okay, maybe the pack should be less bad, right? But I don't know. It's not like it's as bad as the Necrotic Wake pack that exists, right? The Zul'Rimus Gatekeepers, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know. Yeah, could they make those packs a little bit friendlier? Yeah, I'm always in favor of making it so that any pack that's like never correct to pull is nerfed. But I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think these dungeons have like egregious, unskippable Shadow of Zuls in them or anything like that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, that's reasonable. All right, overall, I think I'm pretty happy on the seasonal affix. Has a lot of potential. I think a couple of tweaks to it could be pretty good. I'm excited to see, like, so this is a short season. Maybe the dungeon pool is not the greatest. I think that you and I probably both agree on it. But I'm excited to see like what this means for the future of Mythic Plus realistically, because there's a lot of stuff that absolutely can be reiterated on, and honestly can probably improve Mythic Plus in the long run. So I'm excited to see what things shape up to be. Any final thoughts, Dratnos?
Agree. Yeah, I think very excited about this upcoming season, and even more excited about the implications for future seasons of the shift in philosophy that I think it represents.
All right. What are you guys the most excited for in 925? Do you think the seasonal affix is pretty cool? Do you think that maybe something needs to change? Anything that's glaring to you guys that maybe should be looked at? I'm interested to hear your thoughts on that, and we will see you guys in the next video next week. Goodbye.